So Jesus, this is verse 1 again, chapter 22. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, 'Tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened cattle have been butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding banquet's ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. Go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find.' So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, both good and bad, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. 'Friend,' he asked, 'how did you get in here without wedding clothes?' The man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, 'Tie him hand and foot, throw him outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.'" Isn't that good news? Very inspiring. "For many are invited, but few are chosen." This, the gospel or good news of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You read a parable like that, it kind of ends in a question. But let's get into it. Like in anything in life, context means everything. And we started last week looking at some of these parables in context and getting some better insight. But let's back up a second and recap. When Jesus ministered, I want you to think of Jesus, if you will, for a moment, as not cloaked in religiosity or a culture of religiosity, but on the level of intelligence and brilliance of one of our great thinkers of our time. Put him up there with any philosopher at the time, and just put him in that category for a moment and begin to see how brilliant he was in terms of his intelligence. Now, Jesus taught for a very brief time, 3.5 years tops. That was it. And he spent a great deal of that time teaching people in various venues. But from the get-go, he ran into conflict with, for his culture, would be the religious leadership. And the very last week of his life, he went into Jerusalem, which was the hub, the capital of Judaism. And he began to teach right there in the temple courts, which was, for them, the monument that represented who they were as a people. It's kind of like if somebody were to come in and take down, say, the Statue of Liberty. Would be personally offensive on a national level because we identify with it. And the same thing with Jewish people. They identified with that temple. And he began to teach there, and at that point in time, the conflict between him and the religious leaders of that time got to a point where, as we understand, they eventually just kidnapped him, if you will, in the middle of the night and then killed him after a mock trial. That was the level of tension. So when he's teaching this, he's teaching in that level of tension. And he's directing this parable in particular, not to the general populace, per se, but to those people who he is in conflict with at the temple. And you can read this because you can read the conflict between them in chapters 21, leading up to chapter 22. Big conflict between them. When you begin to understand the conflict, you begin to understand the parable even clearer. And this is, if I was to summarize it summarize it so that we can understand the parable, this is what it would be. As human beings, every single one of us need, not just desire or want, but need to feel valuable. We need to feel like we matter. We need to feel a sense of worth. We need it. And the reason why we need that is because we were created and designed with innumerable worth and unlimited value, every single one of us. If you read in Genesis, let us make human beings in our image and let them have responsibility over everything. The scriptures go on to say that through King David, what is human beings? Who is mankind that you think about us, God? You made us just a little lower than God. Now, when was the last time you thought of yourself as just a little lower than God? Probably very seldom. And yet that is who we are. Which, when you take a look at Jesus' life, means that we are worth dying for. You probably don't hear that very much. But the value of who we are as human beings is such that God was willing to die for us. Now, in that, if we are separated from God and do not know our worth, and yet intrinsically need to have it, we will do certain things to try to create it. And one of the things that's popular across the board is to simply create an image of yourself. We call it dating. That's a joke, by the way. But you know what it is when you're dating. You put your best foot forward. And you want to do that. You want to create an image. But we do that across the board. As human beings, in an effort to attain a sense of value, a sense of worth that we intrinsically need, we will create an image in hopes that people will give us that attention. And if it's not an image that we create on an interpersonal level, it's an image that we can create with our wealth. Look at how important we are. We have this wealth and we put it on display. And that runs across the board. It runs in our political realm. Here's the image. Please like us. We're more valuable. It runs in our social. It runs in our entertainment. It specifically in Jesus' time ran in the religious realm. So that Jesus would say, you know what, be really careful for those people that do spiritual actions or behaviors in front of people so that they get the attention. Because they're just creating this, they're just trying to build a self-image so that you give them your respect. And if you notice, Jesus never did that. He never had the flowing robes. He never had the pedigree. He didn't have any of that. And that was the conflict that he ran into with spiritual leaders. They had invested so much of who they were in their appearance and in the establishment of this system where they could somehow get a sense of worth that when he came in and says, you know what, your worth is not based on that. In fact, to be honest with you, this person who you see as a worthless, fill in the blank, prostitute, thief, drunk, or whatever the case, this person that you consider worthless, they have just as much value as you do. They don't have more, but they have just as much. And that's very offensive. And it's very offensive if you've spent your life trying to maintain, trying to work for value, if you're trying to prove that you're worth something. It's very offensive for God to say, well, these people that don't work are just as valuable as you. And this is why there was animosity, because there's a whole system in Judaism, the practice, that in their mind made them worthy. Now let me ask you this. Does going to church make you a more valuable person? No, it doesn't. However, listening to the Word of God and entering into authentic worship is valuable in and of itself. But the confusion that the religious leaders have is adhering to the law they believed made them better and more valuable, and propagated a false image of who they were. And so when Jesus called them on the carpet, they became threatened by it, especially as they only became threatened when he became popular. Because that's another thing that we try to associate value with. If more people know about me, somehow we think that that's going to give us more of a sense of worth. We call it popularity. Everyone's gone through that. Remember in high school? Who are the popular kids? What difference does it make? Well, they're the ones that have more value. That's why they're voted homecoming king. You see how that works? Why are they king, and why are they more valuable than other people? Because they're more popular. And Jesus says popularity has nothing to do with it. Because human beings, being as fickle as we are, we like you one day and we want to tear you down the next. And that happens in our friendships and can happen in popularity as well. So this is why there was this animosity between Jesus and the religious leadership. And this particular parable is shared in that context. That makes sense? More sense rather? Some sense? Hopefully. So as he is talking, not to the general public, but to these people who he is in conflict with, he says, the kingdom of heaven, which is the most valuable. By the way, if you can live in the kingdom of heaven, if you can actually experience it, it's the most valuable thing because it's the most real, it's the most authentic, and you have unending value. Unending value. It never ends. It never ends. But because we're separated from that in this world, we're born into a world that has a separation. We can't see it. We try to get it from other ways. In fact, some people, if you push comes to shove, if you won't make me like, or if I can't get you to like me, we'll resort to violence for respect. We do it on a national level. Or people will resort to violence by trying to make you, are you going to respect me now, kind of a thing. Or in the home, if we don't feel like we're being valued, we'll get into a fight. And that fight, whether it's verbal or not, can get violent in an attempt to extract from another person a sense of worth. Now, Jesus comes on the scene and he says this, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who is the most valuable person in this realm, who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. These are the people of Israel who have had as their past a sense of identity based on their relationship with God. It is an identity that's ethnic, and it has a history to it, but it has a spiritual history to it. And so the king in this case is God saying, all right, I've invited you to come into my presence and to draw closer to me, but somehow, and when they went out, they just refused to come. And Jesus is now referring to himself. And this is what's very offensive. Jesus is saying, I'm just as valuable as the king because I'm the son of the king. And that just really irritated them. In fact, when you take a look at their offense at Jesus, when they finally killed him, they just didn't kill him. They had to mock him saying, yeah, well, if you're all that, why don't you come down? It's one thing to kill another person. It's another to drag them with accusation and to accuse them of being worthless. You're worthless. If you are this, then God will take you off the cross. But see, you're horrible. You're a fraud. And, we certainly live in a world of accusation. And that's a painful thing to be accused of something. And in this case, he's equating himself and his value to be equal with God. Not that he was equal with God. And this is very different for us to understand because we're separated from love. We don't know how to be in relationship without trying to make ourselves either as or more valuable or less valuable. We call it sizing up. Jesus doesn't size up, nor does God, because pure love doesn't do that. So Jesus is always concerned about his Father's business and not his own. And his Father is always concerned about his business and not his own. And they all point to each other as in each other's beauty. And that's what love does. It builds up. Love never puffs up. It always builds up. But because we're separated from that, the only thing we know how to do is try to jostle and cajole each other to try to manipulate love out of each other because we're limited human beings. And we say things like, well, if you really loved me, you'd do this. Well, maybe. But a 5-year-old can't go to her parents and say, if you really love me, you'll let me watch as much TV as I want. Really? Probably not. If I really loved you, I would be willing to say no to certain things. In the same way that if God really loves us, he'll be willing to say no to certain things. You ever have God say no and you throw a temper tantrum? I mean, I do. And it's a common thing. And so in this particular story, this parable, Jesus is reminding them, God has given this revelation to you. And you are unique in that, but you're disregarding it. And so he goes on to say they paid no attention, one to his field, another to his business. And that's a very common thing to do. When you don't understand the value of who you are as a created being and your relationship with God, we will oftentimes find our value in being busy. Very common nowadays. Doesn't matter really who you talk to. Hey man, how you doing? Oh, I am so busy. Or tired, right? Or both. I'm busy and tired. I've been raising kids for the last whatever years. I'm busy and tired. But I talk to people that are retired. I'm more busy now than I was when I was working, right? You understand? Yeah. We have, now, don't get me wrong, being busy isn't bad, but it is a common thing to try to think that we're going to get our value from being busy. You don't read in scriptures where Jesus was getting his value from being busy. It's not that he wasn't busy. He was. But he didn't get his value from it. And that's, my parents came, my mom exemplifies this. My parents came a few years ago, and it was in the fall, and it was raining outside, and it was one of those kind of windy, rainy days. I loved it. And for me, when it's windy and rainy, I just like to curl up with a book and just read and get lost in a book or a good movie or something like that. And my mom was in the kitchen, and I said, man, look at it's kind of a cold, rainy day today. And she goes, oh yeah, it's one of those days where you just want to stay at home and clean your drawers. That's what? She always has to be busy. I don't think she's going to actually make it in time for her own death because she's going to be so busy. And she's just, I don't have time to die right now. I got all this stuff to do. I mean, that's how she is, right? And it is very easy as human beings to get caught up in being busy, thinking that's going to give you a sense of worth. And sometimes it can give you a certain sense of worth, you bet, but not your entire sense of worth at all. Not that core sense that gives you a sense of purpose and meaning and value that you just radiate with confidence in that way. And so you see in this parable, there are certain individuals that are just so busy, and another says one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. Well, what happens that way? Don't bother us. Why do you want this to happen? And what happens is when God interferes with them, they become. This is an extreme venue, but when you start to become busy in an attempt to get your self-worth, and you start to pursue your self-worth and chase your self-worth, anybody that gets in the way, you throw under the bus. And in this parable, I'll just kill him. I'm going to throw him under the bus. That's what that means. To throw him under the bus means to kill him in an effort to get where you want to go. And people do that all the time. They step on each other to get. That only happens when we really think that if we can somehow attain this level of perfection or get enough done, then we'll have a sense of worth. Now, when you go down to the next part of the parable, then he said to his servants, the wedding banquet's ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. Go to the street corners, invite to the banquet anyone you find. So the servants go out into the streets and gathered all they could find, all the people, both the good and the bad, and the wedding hall was filled. But when the king came in to see the guest, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. Friend, he asked, how did you get in here without wearing wedding clothes. The man was speechless. The king told the attendants, tie him hand and foot, throw him outside into the darkness where there was weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, Jesus, bar none, was the best teacher that has walked the planet. When he taught, they didn't have books. They didn't have iPads. They didn't have pens. They didn't have notepads. They didn't have any of that stuff. So when he gave a lesson, he had to teach it in such a way that it stuck in your head. Does this imagery stick? Yeah. It sticks. The importance of it sticks. You think, oh, that's not my God. He's not that cruel. That's not the point. The point of the story is to realize, at the end rather, is to realize how important the story is. It makes it important, doesn't it? Now, in referring to these last people, the custom, any wedding custom, and it's still true for today, you just don't show up willy-nilly. You know, there's a lot of preparation that's involved in a wedding. A lot. Hey, what do you want, beef or chicken? You know, we're going to have a DJ or we're going to have a band. Where are we going to have it? Who's going to preside? I mean, all this stuff. Our invitations going out. And nowadays, nobody responds to invitations. I mean, do you really? I don't. I should, but I don't. And so that gets frustrating. Then you got to contact people. And there's a lot involved. And in the same way that a lot is involved in a wedding today, a lot of it's involved in a wedding back then. And the point being is that if you're going to be invited to a wedding, it is a very significant show of value and worth in another person. Because you just don't take the wedding list and go through the phone book and invite people. You pick out people that are valuable to you, or valuable to your spouse or soon-to-be spouse, even if you don't like them. I don't know if Uncle Larry should come. Well, I like Uncle Larry. Okay, you come. That kind of thing. In this case, God brings, everybody has the opportunity to come into the wedding, but there's always time to prepare. Almost everybody did prepare, but this person did not. It didn't say there was a lot of people. There was one. One person just completely disregarded the value of the invitation. Does that make sense? He disregarded the value of the invitation and just showed up, and the point being was, when you disregard the value of the message, the consequences are horrific. We teach our children about sexuality, and hopefully we teach them in such a way that we can impart its value. Because if there's absolutely no value, it's going to be a very destructive behavior in our culture. We treat each other as things to get pleasure from, not as valuable human beings, you see. And so the disregard of the value of the invitation, and Jesus is not the first time he said that. He mentioned repeatedly, look, what I'm teaching you is this. God is right here, and he is for you, and you can experience his presence, his strength, his peace, everything. We call it the kingdom. His perfect order where everybody is blessed, where there is absolutely no limitations to the joy and the peace and the strength and the hope that is found in his presence. None whatsoever. It's right here. And then people say, well, I don't experience it. All I see is this. I know. Let me teach you how to do this. And then they said, but you got to be a student. If I'm going to teach you, and I'm here to teach you, you have to be a committed student, because if anyone commits to going to class and they go halfway through the semester and they drop it, you don't get it. And you don't understand the value of what you're committing to. We at a band, by the way, yesterday we had a band event, and there was a bunch of band parents. We all have kids in high school, and right now the big topic is college. And it is very expensive. And one of the things that all of us are involved in is, you darn well better know as a kid how expensive this is, because I don't want you to go to school and not realize how valuable it is when I'm paying for it, right? Same thing. This is the most valuable truth. If this is true, and I can literally experience in my life the very presence of God in a manner that I will never have to be imprisoned by fear, that I can be empowered to the extent where Jesus says I can speak to a branch or a tree or a shrub and it will throw itself. That level of authority, if I can experience that, it becomes the most valuable opportunity of my life. And Jesus explains it in a way that he says there was a man who was out just tending to his field and he ran into a treasure. He just stumbled upon it, and what he did is once he found it, he realizes how valuable it was. He covers it up, he goes, he sells everything he has just to buy this thing. This is what I'm teaching you. But see, many times life gets in the way. And the value that's right in front of us gets buried with all of our to-do things in life and our pursuing of things with a different intent than what they're supposed to be pursued. There's nothing wrong with trying to pursue excellence, or there's nothing wrong with being busy, or there's nothing wrong with tending to your business. It's simply a matter of putting it in proper perspective. This is what's happening. And so Jesus is giving this parable at the end. He says, you know what? If you miss out on this and you continue to chase after things that are not going to give you what you really need and are desiring in your life, you're going to be in the dark. And you're going to be bound. And there's a lot of people that are bound by their fears, their insecurities. They're chasing after things in an attempt to meet a need that they don't even realize is there. Many people are bound by their circumstances. And Jesus is saying you don't have to be. And this is the point of the entire parable. For many are, the last phrase is very, very perplexing. For many are invited, but few are chosen. Anybody want to take a stab at what that means? Go ahead.
That everybody is invited to be in the kingdom, but if they don't choose to be there, then they're not going to get picked.
Choice, right. Now, the interesting thing about choice in this last phrase is many are invited by the king, few are chosen by the king, which leaves an open-ended question. Am I chosen or not? Because you will only know if you're chosen if you set your mind to discover, to be a disciple. It's not performance-based. Well, I'm chosen. I don't know. Was I chosen? Was I baptized? That's performance-based. I know a number of people that have been baptized and confirmed, and they, in their minds, graduated, and they know very little about God. I mean, other than what they were taught. And the value of their education has been greatly diminished because it's no different than me getting a PhD in physics and then deciding to go into some kind of, job in the food industry. It's a valuable education, but it's invaluable because I'm not using it. I'm not applying it. So in a way, and after a while, when I don't apply it, I'll end up forgetting every single thing that I learned. So a number of people in my age especially, you go to church? No, I don't go to church. Remember we went to do you remember anything at confirmation? No. So while that thing was valuable at one time and still is as a body of knowledge, not putting it into practice, you've just negated it, you see. And this is why the open-ended question is so great, because as soon as he says, many are invited, but few are chosen, the people that he's speaking to are now starting to wonder, well, am I chosen? You see, because their value in terms of their image was being a chosen person of God. I'm a Jew, therefore I'm chosen. And Jesus says, no, you're not. You don't come in and participate in the invitation. And so there's so many angles to this. But for us, not being or identifying with being a rabbi, at least I don't think. We have any rabbis in the thing? I don't think so. Bob Schallstein. for us, not having that, the lesson we take is we are not any kind of image that we're trying to create. We're greater than that. And our value is way beyond performance. Our value is inherent and eternal in God. Eternal. The longer I walk with God, the more I realize that, and like a friend of mine who said, I call him a friend, never met him, but he said, I think there's going to be a number of people that will be dead for a number of days and not even realize it. Primarily because the wall between life and death is very thin, and you just kind of pass and you didn't even realize it. It's not like this alternative reality. It's the same reality. It's just with the very presence of God. That gave me pause to think. But nonetheless, the more and more that I meditate on God's Word, and last night I was beat tired because we were out all day and so on and so forth, and I just did not want to set my alarm to get up and meditate. And you know what? Have you ever done that? I'm going to do this tomorrow, and you set your alarm to get up early to Bible study and stuff, and you're just like, you know what? Mr. Snooze looks really good. And that's okay. It's not supposed to, this is a relationship. This is not a bunch of dictated rules and regulations. Try running your household with a bunch of rules and regulations. Now you're going to have them, but you can't run your life by them. They'll destroy you. But anyway, the point is, and I just said, I'm just tired. I can't. But if you can get me out of bed, God, I want to. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is kind of weak. And lo and behold, I woke up and, all right, God, now you got to get me into the shower. Once I'm in the shower, I'm good, right? But I got to get there first. And lo and behold, I had a meditative time today that was not anything that I performed. It wasn't about performance, but just that quality time with God, that He revealed some things to me I'd never seen before in my life. And that wisdom, as parents, you want to teach your kids. You want them to learn things. You want them to discover things. It's a beautiful thing when they discover things and when they tap into their being. Same thing with God. But how are we going to learn things if we don't spend time with God? And it's not easy. God understands that. No relationship is easy. But that's why grace is in play. Grace is God's power on our behalf to do what we cannot do. And the more we rely on grace and learn how to live in grace and have grace active in our lives, the more we can experience God's presence. Like I said, do you realize that Jesus never used the word once? But Paul did, because Paul needed grace. So my friends in Christ, wherever you may be today, and I know we're in various places, and some of us have some what appears to be monumental struggles in front of us. Some of us may be just getting over monumental struggles. Some of us, if you just wait long enough, you'll have one coming down the pike. But either or, who you are in God is not only able to overcome anything that comes before you, but also allows us to realize the unlimited worth and value and perfection of who we are in God. That God will never leave us nor forsake us. Has not, will not, cannot. Amen.